Hey, this is Tom Schwab, and welcome back to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show. Let me ask you something. How many times have you tried to write your way to clarity? You start with that blank page and you second guess every word. I know I do. Well, what if the problem isn't your message, but it's your method? Today's guest is Katrina Kirsch, and she's going to change the way you think about content creation, authorship, and even thought leadership. Now, Katrina is a trained journalist. She's a master listener, and she's the ghostwriter behind many of the Category Pirates' best-selling mini books. She's here to show us why your point of view lives in your mouth, not in your hands, and how speaking your ideas, they can unlock your best writing ever. We're digging into how to create a mini book, one of those short, potent, and profitable pieces of thought leadership, and how they work perfectly with podcasts. If you're a category designer, a professional services, an author, your expertise is worth sharing. Katrina will show you how to turn conversations into content, and content, well, turn that into clients. Now let's talk it out and get it into the world. Katrina, you did a post the other day on LinkedIn that was just like, it felt like you were writing to me, all my friends, and all of our clients, right? When you said, stop trying to write your way to clarity, that your point of view lives in your mouth, not in your hands. And what you have done with Category Pirates of taking that knowledge and putting together in mini books has been amazing. And I really wanted to dig into that. So could you unpack a little bit what you mean by that, don't get clarity from your hand, you get it from your mouth?
Yeah. Well, hi, Tom. Super excited to talk about this with you. And this is something that I definitely use in my work at Category Pirates with Eddie Yoon and Christopher Lockhead and helping write the mini books for them. It's also something I learned a long time ago when I first started working with entrepreneurs and founders. And actually, my first job out of college was working for a tech education startup as a copywriter. So I've been dealing with words and helping people write words and translate their thoughts into words for a very long time, over 10 years now. And the interesting thing, and what I meant by that quote, is a lot of people, especially leaders and executives, founders, entrepreneurs, are very good at communicating and speaking what they feel, what they think, their ideas. They have to explain those to teams. They have to have difficult conversations with people. They have to be able to communicate their vision and in team meetings. And so they get very good at verbal communication. And not all of them. I would say there are definitely a lot who focus on writing. And I think it's super important to focus on writing and learn how to build your skills as a writer. I think anybody can do it if they put the time into it. But most people become better verbal communicators if you're a leader than being able to write it out and explain what they think. I think this is why there's like a famous Jeff Bezos made everybody write these one-page memos, right, in order to distill their ideas and distill their thinking. And the concept there is writing is a practice and it's difficult to do. And oftentimes if you start with verbal communication, you can speak what you're saying first to kind of formulate your thinking, get it out there, and then you can be able to translate that into writing, into a succinct thought leadership piece or mini book or whatever the form may take. But it's kind of crucial from what I've seen to start with the speaking it out first.
Yeah. And it's almost overwhelming, right? If you told me, hey, write a 50-page mini book. Oh man, I'll do that after I go to the dentist.
Yeah.
Right. But if it's like, hey, could we sit down and talk for a few hours on this one topic? Oh yeah. Right. I'll clear my schedule. We'll definitely do that. And so I think one is sort of natural for a lot of people. And the other one is, dare I say, a homework assignment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that there are a lot of people who teach themselves to write. And I've worked with a ton of, I had one entrepreneur, he was the CEO of a biotech company. They were developing a new drug. And he was one of the most amazing CEOs I've ever worked with. He was a super deep thinker. He would dedicate every time, like an hour or two every day, to thinking and reflecting. And he still needed somebody to come in and talk to him for an hour once a week or once every 2 weeks to help him get his thinking out. So then we could turn that into articles for him that he then published as thought leadership and helped the company be able to get attention, raise, a Series B round, ultimately get acquired. So I think that even if you dedicate time to thinking and writing, there's still so much that you leave in your head because you're trying to make your writing almost seem perfect, or it's too free flow subconscious. Like there's kind of this delicate balance between structuring a piece, and you often don't get that when you don't think about it in the same way when you're structuring a conversation.
And we were talking before, and you said that it's different if you're learn to write as opposed to if you're a trained journalist. And you're a trained journalist, but I think the other skill that I have always admired with you is that you are a great listener, right? You can hear all of these ideas and pick out, here's the most important one, and put them in order, right? And make sense of them for other people. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of goes back to the way that I think about structuring a piece is oftentimes when you're talking to somebody and you're having a conversation, you start with a high level overview of a topic. So for example, we're going to talk about the advice that you give founders if they want to start a company. And that's kind of the topic of the piece. And so you have an idea of where you want to go. But oftentimes when you're having a conversation about that, you take loops, you take tangents, they come up with examples, they do this. And they don't always structure it in the way that it needs to be in a piece, right? So part of my job, I kind of think about it as like puzzle pieces. You have like a story is a puzzle piece. There's a header that's a puzzle piece. And part of my job as a writer and any writer who's writing anything is to make sure the pieces are in the right order, in the right place, right? Like you have the frame around the puzzle that you're going to do before you try to fill in the middle. And so oftentimes that looks, when you're writing a piece, it means creating some sort of outline or draft of your main points. So I call these like your main headers. And then you can kind of go in and fill in the details of that header as you go based on the conversation. So I remember this really great piece of advice you gave, and that's going to fit under header A or header B. So a lot of it, how I see it is you almost have to have an idea of the end goal of the piece, right? That you have to have the picture of the puzzle to work from. But then from there, you can kind of fit in these right pieces and put the pieces in the right place.
And is it also you're asking the questions for the puzzle pieces that they missed? My wife refers to it as connecting the dots, right? I'm talking a lot of different things, and I'll use, pronouns and say he, she, it, and I'll never define what the noun was that went that.
Yeah.
So is that one of your skills too, that really makes it take it from somebody's head and really put it into paper?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, active listening is the key skill here, right? If without active listening, you're not getting all the pieces that you need. And this was something that I learned working with just a ton of entrepreneurs in different spaces. So when I actually joined Digital Press, which was Nicholas Cole and Drew Reggie's thought leadership agency, I had a dozen or so clients, and they were in every single different industry you can imagine: sales, marketing, blockchain, biotech, B2C, retail, the broadest spectrum of like people across industries. And I had to be able to write for every single one of them. I was actually an editor and the interviewer, and I had a writer helping me out. But part of that is like active listening deeply to what they say, and notice the moments when there's like a potential for a story or there's nuance, and you're like, ooh, you just said something really interesting, but you've continued on. You've totally, you didn't even realize that you said something interesting. And so part of my job and the job of any writer or ghostwriter or someone who is interviewing founders or entrepreneurs is you have to be able to recognize what they say and what they know, but they don't elaborate on. And a lot of times, the best advice that I ever got is follow your interest. So if somebody says something to you and you're actively listening to them and you're like, that was a really interesting idea or point, I want to hear more about it. You kind of pause and say, hey, you just said something really interesting. Let's dive deeper into that. Or how do you feel about that? Or how did you first learn that lesson? Or what was the background behind this story? And oftentimes how you fill in those gaps or those puzzle pieces or connecting those dots is making sure that you have enough information to kind of back up the point that you want to make. And if you're missing the backup to the point, then the point's not really going to land and it's not going to have the same effect as if you were able to go into detail about it.
We had mentioned the mini book there.
Mm-hmm.
Is that as you're interviewing to get this information, is that what you're trying to get here? Maybe we should define what you mean by a mini book at the very beginning.
Yeah. So a mini book is actually a concept that was created by Category Pirates by Eddie Yoon and Christopher Lochhead and Nicholas Cole. And their idea was I think that how they originally started was they wanted to write a book together. And they brought Cole on because they wanted him to write a book. And what his idea is instead of writing a whole book, which he could do and has done, why not break the book up into these individual chapters or individual mini books and then put them on Substack as a newsletter and be able to monetize the book while you're writing the book, right? So that was kind of Cole and Eddie and Christopher's original idea. And I've continued that on after Cole left Category Pirates and kind of stepped in as that writer. But the idea of a mini book is really interesting because oftentimes if you know the book you want to write, if you have an idea of the book you want to write, you can kind of work backwards. And if you're building your table of contents for your book, that becomes your mini books, right? So for example, I want to write a book about, I want to write a book about, solopreneurs and how they scale. If you have that core idea and you kind of have an idea of like, here's my potential title, here's my potential subtitle, here's the goal of the book, here's the outcome that I want of the book. Oftentimes, if you start to have conversations with the person who's writing the book, for example, if I were to talk to that person, I can kind of get an idea for all of the expertise and frameworks and things they have in their heads. Oftentimes that's what informs the book and that's what the book is going to be about. And then you can kind of work backwards and reverse engineer and say, okay, I can see how this is going to be 10 chapters. Each of these can be its own little mini book. And then we're going to write the book in this way, one chapter, one mini book at a time.
And I love that because I remember somebody told me they'd rather pay $50 for a 50-page book that tells them exactly how to do it, as opposed to $20 for a 500-page book where they've got to go through it. And I thought of that when your last book, you launched that for with Category Pirates for $100, didn't you?
Oh, the Lightning Strike marketing book.
Yeah.
That was an interesting book. And how we came up with the idea for this book was we had a bunch of mini books about lightning strikes, some that Cole had written originally when he first joined Category Pirates, some that I had helped write as follow-ups to lightning strikes. We had been teaching this concept in the Category Design Academy to students, so we were helping them think through lightning strikes. We had a couple of workshops about how to create them. So we had all of this content and intellectual capital around lightning strikes. We had just never packaged it into a concise book. We kind of had all of these scattered things about it. And so part of our idea was, well, why don't we create a book? People keep asking us about lightning strikes and how to do them. Obviously, what we've written hasn't been clear enough, or it hasn't been practical enough, or it hasn't been packaged in a way that makes it easy for people to understand. So by writing this book, which is a lot shorter than most of our books, I think it's less than 200 pages. What we did is we combined, I think there's 6 or 7 mini books in there that we had written about lightning strikes. And then what we did is we added on to it. Eddie did a really great job of this, of coming up with some practical, tactical like quizzes that people could work through to kind of ask themselves questions. We, along with Jack Bigby, our technical AI guy, he created these AI agents to help people essentially work through the checklist with a dedicated lightning strike agent. So it kind of took the book was the practical information about here's how you do this. It's packaged in a nice way, but you can also have these checklists. You can also drive towards this outcome. And here's the practical way to do that. And then if you wanted to join the workshops or work with the AI agents, that was a separate thing that you could choose to buy if you wanted to.
Yeah. And it's amazing how you put that all together. So do you think that for a lot of entrepreneurs, they've already created the content for a mini book? It's just they haven't had somebody that was talented to turn it into a book?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends, right? A lot of people have the experience and the knowledge and the expertise, and they don't recognize it, right? So that's one thing. They don't recognize it, so they never write it down, or they speak it, or they give keynotes, or they they're in meetings or they're coaching or they're advising, they're doing all these things and I think a lot of people have the content. They just don't recognize the value of it, or they recognize the value of it, but they don't know how to package it into a book. That's a pretty common occurrence. Another thing is some people that I've seen is most people I work with have a point of view and they have a ton of expertise and they have a ton of knowledge. They just haven't codified it into a mini book or a book. I would say most people for sure have several mini books in them. The people who have been in their business or in their industry for, I would say like 2 to 5 plus years, 10 years, they for sure have a book in them. But it kind of takes a strong point of view. If you don't have a strong point of view on something, or you're borrowing a ton of content from other people and you haven't figured out your own processes or frameworks for doing it, oftentimes it's really hard to write a book. It's hard to write a mini book. It's hard to write an 800-word article if you don't have a strong opinion on something or your own expertise or experience or frameworks to back that up.
I was going to say, we are both pirates here, and I'll never forget the first time Christopher came to me and talked to me about category design. After I read Play Bigger, I never saw the world the same way. Yeah. So I think you and I know what we mean by point of view, but could you define that from a category design lens? What do you mean by the point of view?
I'm going to be able to do this maybe from a category design lens and also from my own lens, because I've been thinking about this a lot more recently. And I think there's a point of view from a category design lens that, as it pertains to companies and entrepreneurs and founders and people who are building something unique and different, it is a super concise phrase that summarizes how you see the world or the category that you're building in a unique and different way, right? So it's something like, we always give the example of Airbnb and what's their thing? Live like a local, right? So their point of view at Airbnb is live like a local. Well, if you just see that POV, you're kind of like, that's interesting. What does that mean? But once you get to know Airbnb and you understand what they do and the category that they're building, you see like, oh, that can connect to home sharing and renting people's houses and feeling like you're living in a more local home versus a hotel, right? So how I think about it is it's just this very concise, unique, and different perspective on the category that you're building. I think it's a little bit different for a person. If you're trying to think about your point of view, it's similar, but something that I've been thinking about lately is, as it pertains to this conversation, is in order to have a point of view, you have to get the view, right? You kind of have to have this really expansive set of experiences, and you have to know what you're going for, and you have to have opinions. Oftentimes you have to have strong opinions about something. And once you have that expansive 30,000 foot view, you can distill that down into a more concise sentence and a single phrase and a couple of words it's easy to repeat to people. But if you don't have that 30,000 foot view, or you're borrowing that from somebody else, it's really hard to distill it down into a couple of sentences that sound unique and different from anybody else.
Do you think that having an outside observer like you listen to somebody rant and then break it down into, a short sentence, is that powerful? Because as you're saying that, I hear people talk, but it's hard sometimes to break it down into clear sentence, that clear category of this is the unique point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is part of being trained, one, as an active listener, oftentimes as a journalist or a writer or a marketer, or like Eddie does this as a consultant advisor. So you have to have some sort of experience to know what you're looking for first. But yeah, it's super helpful because I'll give a couple of examples. So one is in the academy, in the Category Design Academy, we help people learn category design. And part of that is clarifying their point of view. And oftentimes it's in a workshop. Somebody has this moment, right? We're in a workshop, we're talking about what they do, and we're like, all right, tell me, new person, what do you do? And they talk for 5 minutes. And we're like, great, now tell me what you do. And they have to sit and think about it. And they're like, oh, that 5 minutes didn't explain what I did. And we're like, no, I still don't know what you do. And Christopher is really great at this. He does this all the time where he's like, all right, okay, I didn't understand that. Say it again. And so by ranting to somebody or explaining what you think, oftentimes you have to make them understand what you do, right? And if you use technical jargon or corporate terms, or you're rambling or you're not quite sure what it is, the other person will be kind of clueless or not 100% sure what you're saying. And so by speaking it out and having somebody who can actively listen and know what to look for and ask the hard follow-up questions and push you and make you think, then yes, that's incredibly helpful. And that's how a lot of people get to the, oh yeah, that's what I do, or oh, that's how to say it. But it takes time and it takes thinking and it takes intentional listening in order to do that.
And it takes expertise too, because as you were saying that, I was thinking, you go to the doctor and he says, well, what's your problem? And you give him the 5-minute answer. And then he comes back and he's like, oh, so you've got kneecap pain when your left knee goes into deep flexion. Yeah. That's what I said, wasn't it, for the last 5 minutes? So it's that what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. And I can see where podcast guests at time, where they rant and go on and on. It's like, if they could summarize that, especially at the very beginning of, this is what I believe, this is what I reject. Now we can have a conversation after that. Almost like your strong point of view at the very beginning, just sort of turning the mirror back on us, right? That clarity comes out of your mouth, not out of writing. That's a strong point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does take expertise. It does take listening. It also takes an ability to transfer an idea into layman's terms. So what I mean by this is I worked with the CMO of a blockchain company, and they were creating blockchain solutions for pharmaceuticals in order to track and verify and authenticate pharmaceuticals. Very complex and technical industry. But the goal of working with them and working together was they needed to have these thought leadership pieces and articles go out so that investors could understand, that customers could understand, that partners could understand, that anybody who's kind of curious about the company could understand. And if those were too technical, it kind of needed this balance between being technical, but being also able to understand for anybody. And sometimes having somebody outside of the industry help you create a piece about that is the most helpful way of doing it, because I went in blind. I mean, not blind. I did my research. I listened to a ton of podcasts. I read a lot of articles, but still, I needed the nuance of someone explaining the technical side of things to me. And once I could understand them, I was like, oh, I know how to write about this in a way that would make it easy for other people to understand. So sometimes you just need that mirror. You need that reflection. You need somebody who either has a deep expertise of your industry that they can simplify it. Like I would say, this is what Eddie Yoon does really well. He knows so much about so many industries that he can kind of simplify them to their core. Whereas oftentimes my approach is someone who, when I was first starting, I didn't have a ton of expertise in business. I had to gain that over time. I would come in with almost like an open, curious mindset of, I need you to teach me what you know about this thing. And then I'm going to be able to reflect that back to you in a way that other people will be able to understand it. So I would say that was at the beginning, at least, that was my superpower. And it's changed a little bit as I've learned a lot more about business and things, but you can kind of there's two different approaches that you can take.
Do you think there's a superpower too in sort of that curse of knowledge? Because once you know what you think everyone else knows it, and that curiosity that comes with fresh eyes listening to it for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Most people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know the great things about what they know. And it takes somebody else to recognize that. And oftentimes it's because they've said the thing so many times, right? They've had to give the speeches, they've had to write the reports, they've had to talk to the teams about it and explain their strategy and do all of these things. And it becomes their talk track in their head where they can go and give a speech and not even think about it. But when it comes to like other people have these aha moments when they hear it for the first time. And even though you might have said it a million times, someone could be hearing it for the first time and it could change the trajectory of their business or their career or their life. And I think it takes somebody, like oftentimes what I do is I go in and I say, whoa, what you just said is really important. I think it's really interesting. I need you to notice that this moment was really important and you said something really interesting. And oftentimes then it comes with stories and deeper explanation and how they got there and all of those things.
And it's such a blessing because you can take, the analog discussion and put it into a digital format then that can be used in so many different ways. Talk to me a little bit about like all the different ways that you can use these mini books.
Yeah. So if you create a mini book specifically, I mean, these are long form, dense pieces of content for what they are, really. They're quick reads. You can read them in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, but they contain a lot of thinking and frameworks and expertise in them. And sometimes they're between usually anywhere from 3,000 to 8,000 words. So it's a lot, right? It's like several articles, several like mini chapters in one book. And the really amazing thing is I'll speak like one to pre-AI versus post-AI because I've seen a significant difference, although it's still related. So in kind of the pre-AI world, it was really helpful because you needed these mini books in order to share your thinking. Like it's still relevant, but you needed the mini books to share your thinking. You could give them to somebody and you could say, hey, here's my perspective. Here's my point of view. Go write my social media posts. I'm going to use this as a way to get onto podcasts or get like keynote events or speaking events, or I'm going to turn these into a book eventually, right? Like a mini book is kind of a foundation for most other pieces of content that you could want and opportunities. They're great lead magnets if you want them to be that for your business. There's a ton you can do with them. The interesting thing is now with AI, and like say that was your content library over time, like anything else, like podcasts. Now with AI, the interesting thing that we've been doing is you can put all the mini books, and we've done this with Category Pirates, is you can put them all into an AI, train the AI on your mini books, and then it makes creating any other type of content way easier because the AI has the knowledge of all of those things. So imagine if I wanted to hire, like Category Pirates wanted to hire a new writer. Writing is definitely a skill. It definitely takes a ton of time and effort, and you still have to have the style and the taste and the judgment of a human. I don't think AI has nailed that yet, but it's, for example, like by having the mini books, it's been much easier for us to write our course content. It's been much easier for us to write social media posts, to write email marketing campaigns. It's been easier to write other mini books because the AI is trained, right? Rather than having to keep everything in your mind all of the time. Once you have 5 years of content, you can go back and be like, oh, when did I talk about this thing in the mini book? And like in what mini book? And the AI will be like, oh, here's the story that you've told before about this, you know? So it's kind of like a really great reference tool. And it's a really great way to continue to create more content.
Yeah. And it's like all of the things that Cole created, now that tribal knowledge goes on to you also. And
Yeah.
I agree with you that AI is so promising, but it's not there yet. And I think of you guys are so transparent in what you do and what you're learning. I think of Eddie numerous times. His voice, his clone, reads the books there,
Yeah.
and he always says that the books, this is Eddie's double or something.
Yeah.
And when they start talking about lead generation, that's when I'm like, yeah, Eddie would know that's lead generation, but I get the idea behind it.
Yeah, quality control in AI is a very important thing, and I think it will be for a long time. And I also think something that AI, right, like AI can pick up on certain stylistic things. It can be trained. I always think of it as an intern. You can explain something once and you need to explain it again. You need to give it examples. You need to tell it it was wrong, and it forgets. And it's getting better and better every single day. But I still think, and at least what we found with our writing process and our content creation process with all of these agents and training our own ChatGPT, is there does need to be human oversight and human thought and human expertise and knowledge and editing skills in order to make a piece not feel like it was just written by AI.
So as we wrap up, what would you to say somebody that is feeling stuck, right? They've got the point of view in their head. Maybe they can articulate it, but they can't write it down, or they know they've got a book that would help their business. They just, once again, can't sit down and write that book. What would you tell them?
I would say talk it out, because talk it out with a person or talk it out with an AI. Oftentimes I think it's really helpful to kind of have this stream of consciousness thinking. And just to get your ideas out there, right? Because I think a lot of people have a difficult time sitting down with a blank piece of page and figuring out where to start. And they have 20 or 30 or 40 iterations of their POV. And I think that that's a really good exercise. And I think it's for sure useful. But oftentimes when you start talking about what you feel, how you think, why it matters, the stories and examples that you have that kind of back up that point of view, the nuance, detail of why you believe what you believe, there's some nugget in there. There's some phrase and thing that you say that's unique and different than how everybody else sees it. And that ultimately usually becomes your point of view. So if you can have this sort of free-flowing conversation, whether it's voice memos and voice notes, whether you're going to work with somebody who is helping you write these things, write a mini book, or you're going to be on a podcast, right? A lot of people do this through podcasting as well, as they have conversations like this, and that becomes their intellectual capital and content. So I would just say, like, start by having a conversation with somebody, with AI, with yourself, and record those and upload them into AI and ask for patterns, ask for recognition, ask it to pressure test your thinking. I think AI is a good first step to kind of codify that and have a foundation. And then once you feel like you're like, okay, I have an idea of what this might be, then, you can go and work with a writer, or you can start a podcast, or you can, start to create that more formal piece of content around it.
Yeah. Thanks for giving us permission to talk it out and not just have to sit down and write it out perfectly on the first try. So, Katrina, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best place?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, just at Katrina Kirsch. There's a little pirate flag next to my name. You can also find me on my website at KatrinaKirsch, KIRSCH.com. And that's where I talk more about mini books and newsletters and writing, and just how to kind of be able to codify your thinking and your expertise and point of view into a more formal mini book or newsletter.
Yeah. Thank you for who you are, all you do, and how you can take all that genius that you hear going around you in an analog world and put it down in a digital world so we can all learn from that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tom.
That was Katrina Kirsch. And if you're like me, you're probably rethinking how you create content. We often hear everyone has a book in them. But what Katrina showed us is that most of us already have the content. We just need someone to listen, structure, and pull out that gold. Many books aren't just easier to brew. That was the amazing Katrina Kirsch. And if you're like me, you're probably rethinking how you create content. We often hear everyone has a book in them. But what Katrina showed us is that most of us already have the content. We just need someone to listen, to structure it, and pull out that gold. See, many books aren't just easier to produce, they're more effective. They're faster to write, easier to read, and perfectly positioned for today's busy world. So here's your next step. Stop trying to write your way to clarity. Instead, do what I do and a lot of other thought leaders and entrepreneurs do. Talk it out. Use podcast interviews, a voice memo, or even a conversation with AI to get your ideas out of your head and into the world. Then turn that spoken expertise into a mini book, something you can monetize, you can gift it to leads, or use it as your authority piece. Pair that with podcast interviews, and you've got a scalable platform that builds trust and turns listeners into leads. And if you want to help with the writing part, well, please reach out to Katrina at KatrinaKirsch.com. She's the real deal. You've got brilliance inside you. Now it's time to speak it and share it with the world.